Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Vaughn and Dan podcast. I finally have gotten Dan back on the podcast. I'm so excited to have him back. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more politics, and that is why I have my man on today. Welcome back, baby.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes. So, some things that I'm going to have Dan tell you a little bit about his history and just being very knowledgeable about politics and history and how the world comes together in that sense. Because I know I've asked him, but I don't want to give him credentials that he might not have. But he's worked in DC, he's traveled the world working in that industry and really studying it carefully and still does. And I'm not sure if you guys can see all of the books that we have on the wall in our studio. So he is very well read, and a lot of the things that we're talking about when we talk about politics here is not like just us talking out our butt, but it's really us talking from studying, from experience, and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I don't come to an issue like this very lightly at all, especially not just given the implications it has for society in general, but what are the particular implications it has for me, and what are the precedents being set by this type of action. And that's really where my studies actually begin, is how do the organized, well-financed groups that start these things perpetuate them and propagate them and actually bring them into reality
Mm-hmm.
as we see. Many people, I would say, in this area certainly did not see this coming, and I absolutely did. For many years, I saw this coming. It was clear as day. And I think the main reason people did not see this coming is because they live in their own bubble and only watch media or consume the ideas that they're comfortable with. Now, you have to take a step back and understand that when you are engaging with people, not random people, I'm talking about people who are actively involved in this type of thing. I call it the core four: smart, talented, passionate, and hardworking. Now, all four of those things sound positive into and of themselves. However, without a moral compass to guide where that energy goes, smart, talented, passionate, hardworking people could be on the very side of something that you find appalling and horrifying, and you need to take stock of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to decide, to what level am I going to be personally involved in stopping that bullshit from happening. And living in DC allowed me to see a lot of these things operate out just out in the open. A lot of it happens in bars with people drinking and just meeting each other and saying, hey, we feel the same way about this particular issue. Let's find a way to make it happen. The real term is called lawfare. Basically, in taking the principles of how you win a war and bringing them into the U.S. legal system and finding weaknesses to probe and prod and methodically, incrementally push your agenda forward. January 22nd, 1973 is when Roe v. Wade was established. This allowed women the right to choose whether or not to have an abortion nationally, and it was legally protected. Up to that point, it wasn't protected everywhere. There were absolutely discriminatory practices against people who basically did not look like me, share my skin tone, and just appalling things that had to happen on the side, because in real life, people do get together and do have relations, and it just happens. It just does happen because that's the natural course of life, no matter what your political persuasion is.
Mm-hmm.
These actions that we saw the past few months, where in the Supreme Court Roe v. Wade was overturned, that was the spark was set with Roe v. Wade being established. The real establishment of the U.S. religious right being actively involved in politics was set forth by the Roe v. Wade decision.
Mm.
It's where all the money started organizing around. It was the principle by which people would identify themselves as being a Christian or not. It's foundationally meant You are either for this genocide, which is what they refer to it as. Abortion is genocide.
Mm-hmm.
If your mindset is exactly that is what it is, then of course you're going to work against that. If you view it under the liberal interpretation, it is a medical decision, essentially. And with Roe v. Wade, it legally means that rights are being taken away. And above anything else, that is really what you should be concerned with. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. Go ahead, babe.
Well, one thing I did want to have you give people is kind of your background. Well, you kind of touched on it a little bit. You were in DC, you were working in that world, but also you've gotten a degree in this sort of study. What was your degree specifically that you got?
I have a master's in Middle East Studies.
In Middle East Studies. So mostly a master's in Middle East Studies. And then what was your bachelor's in?
Fire Protection Administration.
Okay. So just a little bit different for your bachelor's, but you went into Middle East Studies. And what was the base behind you going into, or what was your motivation behind going into studying?
Well, being a Jew, certainly I always had a certain perspective and focus on the Middle East. Mm-hmm. That certainly came much from my mother's side of the family, just everyone talking about this and that, understanding what it meant to be Jewish, understanding history of and the cultural aspects, and honestly, the part that really didn't, it wasn't that it resonated more, but it has had a more profound effect, is the incredible, ubiquitous nature of anti-Semitism. Mm. It is everywhere, and the more scary part to me is not the people who go around screaming, "I hate Jews, I want to kill Jews." The more, I don't know if it's important, but the part that bothers me more is the people who are willfully ignorant and choose to do nothing about it. And that's a much broader percentage of the population.
Right.
It's just not in their wheelhouse. It's an accepted, bigoted, ancient hatred that keeps getting recycled and remarketed and reformatted to fit anyone's self-serving view. And that view is also in DC. I saw it firsthand. And I guess I have a little bit of my grandfather's camouflage in that I look the way that I do, but I actually am a Jew. So many people would talk to me and say certain things to me that had absolutely reprehensible connotations. And they had no idea I was a Jew. And they would just keep going. And years ago, I would usually I would get right in people's faces. Like, there are a few things in life where nope, not gonna have it, not gonna take it. If I hear it, I'm confronting you. I don't really do that anymore. Mostly because way more people are heavily medicated and probably armed. And it's too many people. I could spend my entire life dedicating just to trying to get less anti-Semitism to be in the world, and I would be a spectacular failure. And I'm good at it. I am really good at it. I have a track record of convincing people to drop their anti-Semitic bullshit. But it's always like this. It's two people really talking and them getting to understand my perspective. And I just kind of undermine and chew away at their arguments because they're always fabricated, self-serving bullshit. But that's the problem. Anti-Semitism, and the reason it works is it always befits the user of the anti-Semitism to have an easy target to blame.
Scapegoating.
Yes, exactly.
That's how a lot of this division works in our country. So you went to DC and you started working there after you've received your master's in Middle East Studies. And so you went from So I forgot where you were studying Middle East studies.
I went to Ben Gurion University in Beersheba, in
Okay.
the middle of the Negev Desert in Israel.
Okay. And then from there, it probably took some time, and over time, you were able to relocate to Washington, D.C., and you worked. What industry did you work in? Can you remind me of
I
that?
was an unofficial lobbyist. So
Okay.
usually you need to register as someone who will be representing people who may or may not live in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. Most of the people I was unofficially representing were residents of both the United States and Afghanistan. I was helping develop and coordinate different construction projects that could happen, and a few of them did, but ultimately the unbelievably fractured politics of Afghanistan kind of blew everything up. And really, the opium economy kind of supersedes everything else going on.
Wow.
It does. It does. The opium economy in Afghanistan, it's not just about being the end product, being able to sell heroin in the United States and Europe. It's about the entire product of the opium plant. They actually use it to build houses, they
Mm.
use it to make bricks, they use it as part of fertilizer. So it's integrated into how their society and culture functions, especially in the southeast Helmand province. And they didn't want to give it up. And
Mm.
if they had to give it up, they wanted to be bribed with something else that would be just as profitable. The only viable alternative to opium in the area was saffron.
Mm.
I don't know if you're aware that saffron sells, it's incredibly, if you can produce it at a certain way, you can sell it for quite a bit. Just pretty much just about the same as opium. Problem with getting opium into and out of Afghanistan is Afghanistan's landlocked, and Pakistan uses their leverage with basically trucking mafias to take a cut of the business in order to get all the opium from Afghanistan down to the ports in Karachi.
Wow.
And it's a pretty dirty business. Local Afghan politicians are directly tied to and involved in all the narco trafficking operations that go through that area. Former warlords involved in the war against the Soviets in the 80s. Most of them were drug traffickers before they were warlords.
Wow.
So it's unintended consequences, which is actually kind of the opposite of Roe v. Wade, where something happened and people just didn't want to see that everyone who was outraged by the passing of Roe v. Wade coordinated all kinds of financial resources, got their marketing strategy together, got smart, talented, passionate, hardworking people on their side,
Mm-hmm.
and said, we want to change this however possible, in whatever way possible. We are so against this. All the while camouflaging out and screening away the idea that it is a completely anti-woman measure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should speak to that more than me.
Well, before we get into that, because we definitely will be getting into that, I really want people to know a little bit more about you and understand the connections here with politics, and why I wanted to start off with the political
Mm-hmm.
ramifications of this Roe v. Wade decision before I got into kind of my personal experiences and kind of my viewpoint on this issue as a whole. We're also going to bring in a female medical practitioner who works in women's health, so we can understand the medical side of it in the next episode. So, but right now, I really want you guys to I want to get you guys the full perspective on the political side of Roe v. Wade. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of your whatever you've heard from mainstream media. I want you guys to kind of understand it from a different perspective, from somebody who's actually studied this religiously, other than somebody who's actually has personal experience, which I'll talk about that in a second. One question I want to ask you, Daniel, is what did you learn from politics after being acting as a lobbyist in DC and studying Middle Eastern studies and working with these people you were just mentioning before? What is the thing that you learned about politics through your work?
That small, dedicated, well-financed minorities absolutely do drive change in every society. not just in the Middle East, not just in countries that have fractured politics. It happens right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it comes back to ignorance. I mean, the names are out there. A lot of what I end up doing is simple, basic, straightforward, focused research on where did a problem come from.
Mm-hmm.
And the introduction of far-right religious ideology specific to controlling women's bodies and being involved directly in politics while at the same time saying, no, we want a strict separation of church and state. It's kind of playing both sides and in the exact way an evil empire would.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost comes across as cartoonish, but it's profound in its implications. And if you really wanted to trace the modern history of this, it comes from a Norwegian minister, a Methodist minister named Abraham Veridi. He formed a group called the International Religious Council, and his ultimate goal was to infuse all Western nations with a Christian ideology into their political parties and find ways to exercise influence through those parties through a broad range of networks. Some of you may have heard of the National Prayer Breakfast, something assembled by the disciple of Abraham Veridi, a guy named Douglas Coe, who operates much more in the shadows than, say, someone like Billy Graham, who everyone's heard of. Everyone knows Billy Graham, evangelical minister, provided religious guidance to every single American president for almost 5 decades. His son still actively preaches. Douglas Coe prefers to take a different route. He prefers you not know his name. The name of his group, amazingly, is called The Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not lost on me that he views what he is doing with some kind of divine influence and divine path. That he thinks he is doing God's work by helping structure layers of relationships and influence that guide the decisions that he wants to have happen go in that direction. And the National Prayer Breakfast is the main platform that he uses. He invites people that he wants to influence their decisions on. And it ends up being not only a business meeting, but an avenue to discuss ways to get laws passed that wouldn't pass muster, wouldn't be popularly perceived. Even now, in this country right now, most people do want choice for abortion. And
Mm-hmm.
he's been able to enact policy and find people who will vote a certain way and structure so that judges can only vote a certain way, because sometimes judges need to raise money in order to get elected, which I think is profound and ridiculous. We also have the Supreme Court justices that have recently been appointed. Every single one who leans right, every single one, let me repeat that, every single one committed perjury by saying, no, Roe v. Wade is settled law and will not change under my watch. 3 months ago, changed under their watch. Every single one of them was lying under oath. In order to be confirmed as the Supreme Court justice, you have to go through a confirmation process. There's certain things that are made public about your past, and you have to answer very basic questions from the Judiciary Committee on what your actual views are on settled cases and things that would be profound for society in general, because the Supreme Court is the court of the land and does set precedent, which other courts need to follow. That's why this matters so much. The people who are dedicated to eliminating the woman's right to choose are, into and of themselves, exercising their power in a democracy through undemocratic means. They wish to exercise power through lies, through deception, not through the ballot box, not through voting. They wish to place people in power who will read their script the way they read it, the way they want it. And the exercise of power is ultimately how I see this, and perhaps my not being a female allows me to see it that way. But structurally, this was a power move. It was a direct message saying, yes, not only are we going to push the rest of our nonsense agenda, we're also going to go inside women's bodies and say we also control this too. I'm not okay with that.
I definitely am not okay with that either. Anytime I hear this conversation and we go back into that conversation of uh, a woman's trying to control women, I'm always asking myself for what purpose. If we go back to that person you were talking about who wants to work in the shadows, and
Doug Coe.
Doug Coe, and he wants to push his agenda, being whether he wants to label it Christian or not, because I'm raised Christian, so it's like, okay, is what he's doing Christian? Well, I probably would say no.
The voice against him
Mm-hmm.
is much louder coming from you
Mm-hmm.
than it ever could be coming from me, because he's just going to say, oh, you're just some silly Jew.
Right. So I was raised Christian. I am in a relationship with my boyfriend who is Jewish, but I still am here sometimes bumping my gospel music. And so and I still have faith, even though I do kind of consider my faith a little bit more universal because of the institution of religion having wanting and needing, for whatever reason and for whatever purpose, through their divine right, to have control over women and to oppress. And they have used their language to oppress minority groups such as my group, African Americans, who did not come to this country Christian. Many did not. We had our own religion before that. That was done to a lot of other indigenous cultures around the globe. And so anytime I hear this language around trying to control or silence a people, be it their gender choice, or their culture, their religion, I'm always asking for what purpose. So for what purpose do people want control over a woman's body? I don't have that answer. I won't say I don't have that answer. I don't have an answer that doesn't sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole path. I just want to keep that question open in people's mind. For what purpose do they want this? I don't only see it as a law that is anti-woman. I see it as a law that's anti-family. I see it as a law that is really going to hurt a lot of Black communities. Specifically, it's a law on economics. It's not just a women's law, it's an economical law. Because when you have kids in a household, a lot of times people think that it's just the woman's choice. And if you're in a relationship, and if you're not in a relationship, and a healthy relationship, then it might just be your choice. But there's a lot of families who make this choice. There's a lot of husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, or people who are in homosexual relationships, or, I'm sorry to sound ignorant when I say that. I'll cut it there. There's a lot of people in a lot of different types of relationships who also make this decision. So it's really an economical decision, because what happens when you have more mouths to feed? You have to work more. You're under more stress. Mm-hmm. And what's happening right now, there's a lot of people right now, what I'm seeing, a lot of people right now who are stepping away from normal 9-to-5 jobs, working for somebody and choosing to work for themselves. There's a huge move at this point in our lives to move away from working for somebody. And a lot of people are doing hustle type jobs. A lot of people are making good income driving for Uber or Lyft, or creating an online YouTube channel like this one. There's a lot of people moving away from working for somebody and starting to work for themselves, right? So how is that impacting our economic situation? And how is that impacting the upper 1%?
Well, given that these procedures almost always cost money, Sometimes there are subsidized groups inside Planned Parenthood that do provide funding for it. But overall, you still need to be able to get to a place that actually will provide the procedure.
Hmm.
And there has been a methodical, incremental strategy uh, implemented to great effect by the Republican Party to essentially outlaw the existence of any clinic that will provide this procedure. They've been able to exploit ADA laws, which require certain expansive hallways for medical procedures, and been able to get abortion clinics closed just for that reason alone. And it's that type of measure that they're willing to take. The other part of this that we're not really talking about is the explosive nature of social media and propagating other ideas about abortion that have nothing to do with what abortion is. It's simply a decision and a medical procedure. We were watching The Boys on Amazon Prime, and there's this character that they introduced called Stormfront. And I thought it was remarkably clever how they played her and some of the lines that she was saying towards the end of her character arc. Spoiler alert, she did not end up faring well. I'm not saying she's dead, but anyways, I actually remember watching in that certain episode with you and you laughing at about a paragraph of dialogue. And I realized, oh, these are things I've heard before. But to you, you had never heard such outrageously silly nonsense like white genocide.
No, I heard it. That's why I laughed. I laughed at the absurdity and how the spin, because that show, they have this media agency where they're doing and utilizing a lot of spin to spin atrocities that these superheroes, and yes, I'm putting superhero in quote because
Watch the show.
yes, right? So, and spinning it to say that a group of people that has historically been oppressed and just there have been genocidal atrocities against these group of people, they are the monsters. They are the ones rising up against people who look like her, who look white, who are trying to do harm against those people. And I'm not saying these fringe groups don't exist, but that is not generally what's happening here.
They're fringe.
Yes. There's a lot of fringe groups out there and they do commit atrocities, and that's horrible, and I do not condone any of them whatsoever. I just want to make that clear.
The idea that we could possibly be comparing the enormous growth of the quote unquote right-wing Christian national patriot movement to a silly group of college-age kids throwing Molotov cocktails in Antifa, it is not a fair comparison to make.
Mm-mm.
They are both fringe groups. However, on the right, the fringe perhaps needs to be taken out of it, as there's a far wider acceptance of that type of ideology than many of us would like to admit. It is convenient and authoritative and is able to provide reasons for why your life perhaps isn't the way you want it, a direct target for the people who are keeping you from what you are looking to achieve, and the requisite reason behind taking whatever actions you need to take in order to preserve your own identity, the identity they provide for you, and your future livelihood. And I don't know how well versed you are in KKK ideology, but most of the neo-Nazi KKK groups in the United States have something called the I think it's the 14 words, which is we must preserve a future for our white children, some kind of nonsense like that. But the white genocide thing is really about abortion. It's not just about immigrant groups or whoever isn't white coming to kill white people. It's directly about abortion and about assumptions being made that any non-white person is having much more kids than white families will, and that any white children any white child that is ever killed via abortion is a demographic problem. That's what white genocide really is about.
Wow.
That's why they're against it.
Wow. I never even would have thought of it that way. That is just wild. And it's also very sad to me.
Because it's easy racism.
Yes. And so this is the reason why, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're a Democrat," and they'll try to point fingers at me and say, because I'm black, because I look a certain way, that I am automatically should be, I am voting, or I think a certain way, which is just BS. Number one, I absolutely do not um what align with any political party. And the reason being is I always say I'm an independent. I am an independent. I will forever be an independent because it's so I see the divisions in our country, be it race, be about gender, be about gender choice, be about your religion, be about your political position, that are just so divisive. And it doesn't help the conversation, because if we really boil it down to the root cause of pain that everybody is going through right now, there's universal pain within that. And it's easy to go towards scapegoating and go towards these ways of thinking that we're talking about, because scapegoating makes it's easy way for people to make their life and make their pain make sense.
It's the number one way. It's not a new idea. It's been used for a very long time. And Jews are all too familiar with having to navigate that spectrum of universal hate. I would say it would be hard to argue that Jews are not the most hated people on earth. And I say that with pretty much no reservations whatsoever. And I think people should take that into account. Why is that hating Jews is so accepted? And I wish there would be more self-reflection, but as you pointed out, it's like snack food. It's easy and convenient and satiates what you need to satiate. Sometimes the urge to eat candy in order to satisfy a hunger is the exact same as the need to cast blame.
Well, it's easy to one of the reasons why it's easy to satiate is because it's easy to not have that conversation. People rather not have the conversation with somebody who thinks differently than them. Even the Democratic Party, even people who are liberal, even people who think they think the right is right, and they are so inclusive, believe that they are too good to have a conversation with somebody who they deem evil.
And evil has religious connotations. I actually think it would be incumbent upon me, maybe I'm being too self-reflective about this, but using the word evil specifically has religious connotations. If you're able to cast someone or something as evil, the actions you take against it or to stop it are essentially a blank check.
You get to justify it.
You can justify anything.
And using religion to justify any action it's like divine right. I have the divine right to do this. I have the divine right to take away a woman's choice. I have the divine right to do whatever you want because so and so says so. God says so. Whatever the law says so. Right? And there's so many things that we believed were right back in the day that we would now think differently of.
Right? Progress isn't always a straight line or a seen pathway. I think Martin Luther King said the moral arc of the universe always bends towards what's right. And much as I don't like to disagree with them, I think dedicated people who want morality in society have to be involved. You can't expect things to just work out. And that's the problem. Apathy, thinking you can't make a change, or assuming that things will go the way that you want them to, and not really taking into account all these people you probably cast as, oh, they're just lunatics, or I just disagree with them and then leave it at that. No, they are coming for your rights. They are coming for you,
Mm-hmm.
and they care more about the rights of guns than they do about the rights of women.
I don't know if this is where we differ, because I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't believe that. And this is where the conversations need to be had. If a man has a gun, I know plenty of people who have gun in their homes to protect the women in their house, right? And so it goes back to that great clip that you shared with me, that I actually shared it on my Instagram story, about the man who was talking about how a lot of women generalize men and say that they are the 1%ers and they're the ones trying to oppress them, when a lot of these men don't make enough money to be a 1%er, and they're breaking their butt, much like you do for me, baby, and I love you for it, to provide for their women. So I don't believe the gun issue is necessarily the case. This is an opportunity for us to sit down with those people who want to keep their guns, and for people who really want to get rid of those guns, to sit down and have those conversations. Because I personally believe that there is a root universal pain there. And it's usually a human being makes a choice. I think it can be a binary choice. It's usually not a binary choice, but we can think about it binarily and say, okay, my pain here is that I don't want my child to die. I have the choice to buy a gun to protect that child. That person always also has, I don't want my child to die. I do not want guns in schools. That pain is the same. The person's choice on how they are able to protect themselves from experiencing that pain varies. And that's a great thing about being human. That's why we need to sit down and have these conversations with people, to really realize that we're all human and we all have a choice to make. I had a choice to make. And this is why Roe v. Wade, and having this conversation about Roe v. Wade, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of hate on this video.
Oh, expect it.
But I really want to open the conversation up. I had a choice to make whether I was going to be a mother or not. I was pregnant on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. I found out I was pregnant on the flight deck. And it was kind of a funny story, I'll tell you. It's not funny. It's not a funny story, but how I found out, to me, is kind of hilarious, because we were supposed to get shots. I think we were supposed to get the smallpox shot, and I was late, and I was like, oh, shit. I was more lazy, and I was like, I don't want to get my shot today. Maybe I'll find out if I'm pregnant or not, because I haven't had my period. And I went down there. I got tested, and then the doctor just comes in. He's like, okay, we're going to give you a chit to pull you off the flight deck for so many weeks. And I'm like, okay, why? You didn't give me an answer here. He's like, oh, you're pregnant. I thought you knew. I'm like, no, I didn't know. What the hell? This is how you tell somebody they're pregnant? Thank you, USS military.
Yes. The bedside manner is incredible.
Yeah. But that's how I found out. And I was on the ship. And so I was originally going to just be a mom, because I thought that I had done everything I could to protect against being pregnant. I was not on birth control. And I did use Plan B. It was not my choice to engage in sex. I'll just say that much. It was not my choice to engage in sex. And I did use Plan B. And so when I found out, I thought that I did everything I could to protect against getting pregnant. And so I called my mom. I had a conversation with her. And she helped me understand that, there's a better path for you, essentially. And this doesn't have to be your choice. You don't have to make this about a moral decision. You can, right? But she reassured me that there will be someone in your life who actually wants to be a father to your child. And she didn't want me to be a single mom, and she didn't want me to experience that pain of being a single mom. And so I sat and I thought about it, and I decided to go with it. It was a very hard decision, and I'll tell you, like, if you see your friends on there boasting about having abortions, it's not necessarily a painful physical process, but it is a spiritually and mentally, emotionally painful process. And it is the biggest pain of my life. Do I regret having to make that decision? Yes and no. There's no clear-cut answer. But at the end of the day, it was my decision. And there's a lot of opportunity that I would not have had experience. I would not be doing this podcast. And I definitely would not be doing jiu-jitsu had I not made that decision.
Imagine not even being able to have that be a choice.
It wasn't a choice. I didn't have that choice. I could not get an abortion through the military. Not at that time.
They wouldn't provide one for you?
Absolutely not.
Oh. That is news to me. I thought the military had to provide certain procedures.
They could not provide that procedure for me.
Wow.
I could not pay for it. My mom flew me down to Florida, and we didn't even tell them what the flight was about, because right before that training mission we went on was a month before full on deployment. And so before full on deployment, you already get time off to take. And so we took advantage of that time, flew down to Florida, and I got it done then. And I did not tell anybody about it. I just said I had a miscarriage. It was none of their business. But no, the military does not provide that. At least when I was in, they didn't provide that support. And so when I was on deployment, towards the end, I was experiencing a lot of stuff in the military. The military is a cesspool for a lot of sexism and bullshit for a woman. So it was just hard. But towards the end, in the last month, I found jiu-jitsu, was losing my mind. Jiu-jitsu saved my life. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, she said hashtag jiu-jitsu saved my life. Yes, that's not bullshit, because I was on fucking deployment, losing my fucking mind, about to jump off the ship, and somebody jumped guard and put me in an arm guard, and that moment saved my life. And it gave me a purpose. The other thing that gave me the purpose during that time was to actually go into journalism. And that's how I met Tirza, because of journalism. I would not know her if I didn't decide in that moment to go into journalism. And I wrote a paper, and I wrote it and sent it to I forgot what it's called in the military, but they have like a news outlet, a press, a media center. I did the research, and I wrote and researched about the lack of support for these type of issues, for birth, for a woman going through birth, for a woman having post-traumatic, basically kind of a form of PTSD and depression after going through pregnancy, after giving birth, the lack of support there for women's health. At that time, I wrote that paper and I sent it to him. And of course, it was not printed, but that was the fire for me to really study and understand journalism. And I went to SF State, met Tirza, our dear producer, and a lot of opportunities I would not have had I not made that choice. And so this whole conversation about Roe v. Wade, and when you hear people say things about the lack of support, I guess it will, and funding for women's health, and how women's health is underfunded, is real, because it's not just about the financial backing for women's health, but it's also the education there, and the access that people need, don't understand that they need to know. So where it started, that this was back in 2009. So a lot of these support, they called it sexual PTSD, a form of sexual PTSD only specific for women. And that started to be, after I got out, that started to be a little bit more common language when I go to VA Health Center, and then we talk about that there, right? That is starting to be more common. But also, when I start to have these conversations about female athletes and how you're supposed to exercise and eat as a female athlete, a lot of female athletes don't know that there's actually specific protocol for how you need to exercise and eat based on you being a biological woman, if you are.
Not a small man.
He loves that. So he says not a small man because where I'm getting all this information, if you guys watched my previous videos from Dr. Stacey Sims, women are not small men, and he just loves that title. But yeah.
In listening to you, I was formulating a question, which in actually thinking about it, I realized was not really fair. Here's what I originally was going to ask you. How do you feel about there being different rules for different women across the country? But as a black woman, I'm sure you're all too familiar with there being different rules and regulations just as a black woman living in America. But really, I'd like to ask you both. Do you feel privileged living in a blue state where this option is available to you, as opposed to living in Texas where they can now bounty up and turn you in like you're a criminal? And you'll be fined money and publicly shown to be doing it. I mean, is that okay with you?
Well, first, let's talk about California. Let's hope it's still legal, because we're coming up on a election. Sorry, people, I don't know how to talk. We're coming up on an election November 8th. And that Roe v. Wade and protecting abortion rights is on the ballot. So hopefully, it's still legal here in California after that vote. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but just based on what we see, nothing's guaranteed to me.
That's really the essence and thesis of all of this.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to protect what you value. It is not permanent, and it can go away.
Yeah, exactly. And we can't just be all apathetic and lazy and not motivated to go up and vote on these things. You guys, I'm talking to myself here because I feel it. I don't always freaking vote in these non-presidential elections, so my ass will be voting because we got the ballots. And that's me making promise to myself. About Texas, that's some bullshit. Also, Texas, you crazy? What the fuck? I want to move to Texas because freaking real estate here in California sucks, but that is also terrifying.
How about Arizona, where now there's roving right-wing militias patrolling voting booths? You comfortable with that?
Hell no.
People with arms just standing in line. Oh, how you voting?
But there has to be some sort of, yes, we have gun laws. Gun laws are protected, but we have to have some sort of protection against voting.
The same people.
And intimidation.
They're, and not in every state, the same people who are doing this voter intimidation bullshit are also aligned with the people who are taking away your right to choose.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
Mm-hmm.
They're linked. Same group, same party. Won't always admit affiliations, but they are linked. It's like Trump saying he doesn't know who the Oath Keepers are. He's full of shit.
Of course, we know Trump is full of shit. We know this. Oh, well, a lot of people don't know it. Actually, I should not take that for granted either, because a lot of people believe him 100%.
That same line comes up. It's, if your rights can taken away, were they rights? Did they ever exist in the first place? Or were they privileges that we assumed would always be there?
That should be a quote. I'm glad I have you record it, because I am gonna put that on Instagram
Snapshot,
post.
whatever you like.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
So you're not okay with the bounty system?
Oh, absolutely. 100. It doesn't even make sense. And I love that. I think Tears has shared this post with me about a woman who was talking about that bounty system. And you did share that post with me. It was long. You share so many things with me, Tirza, that she probably doesn't remember. But it was this black girl who was like kind of doing a self reflection of a girl who's about to have abortion, and then another reflection of a guy who's gonna kill her for having that abortion. And it just doesn't make any sense. Like, think about it. You're killing somebody who's about to have an abortion. So you're killing two people. So are you doing her a favor or not? You're just taking away two people's lives. And she was just going to make sure that she could have a life where she could feed herself and live a healthy life. And her child probably didn't have to suffer through being impoverished, you know? Or who knows what her situation is? How do we even know that she had consensual sex in order to get pregnant? Maybe she has a child in a relationship or in a situation where that child would also be abused and then having to experience sexual abuse.
Yes, it's a lack of understanding about how the real world works.
Yeah.
It's the universality of saying no abortion, no excuses, under no circumstances can you have it. And that simply isn't the real world. Real world does involve things that you don't want to talk about, like rape, like incest, like forced sex in any fashion, in any way. And
forced selling of sex, forced
Yeah.
selling of children into
sexual
sex.
slavery. Yeah, absolutely.
It's all real. It was that 11-year-old, it was several months ago, where that 11-year-old girl could not get an abortion in her own state.
In Ohio. Yeah.
In Ohio, in her own state, and her parents.
11 years old. Let's
Yeah.
not gloss over that. 11. It's beyond comprehension that there are no caveats at all. And I genuinely, even though there are fewer and fewer, do respect the pro-lifers who believe abortion should mostly be rare but legal, and include those caveats where you do allow it. You just don't like it being a regular thing, which I can kind of understand that point of view. I do. But the 100% no, that you're not living in the real world. That's just, you have blinders on like a horse just going forward, and you don't want to see anything else.
Right.
It doesn't exist to you. It doesn't matter to you. And if you're confronted with it, you'll either deny it or look to discredit it or look to destroy it.
And I understand that need for actually having some sort of standard around the law, right? When it comes to late term abortions and things like that, because that's a risk both towards the unborn child or fetus and the mother. But it should be definitely a medical consideration. And also, you guys consider that I have friends, actually, and know somebody who was late in her pregnancy and didn't know she was pregnant. There's a lot of women who do experience that, or a good amount, who do experience this lack of knowing that they are pregnant, and their pregnancy goes on for a long time. So there's everyone's different. Every pregnancy is different. Every situation is different. And so I understand the need to actually put some sort of boundaries around this law, because we can't just be going over to the abortion clinic like we're popping pills out, or something like that. We just can't. I think that's morally irresponsible.
It isn't that it doesn't happen, and I clearly don't like that either. But that is a fringe thing. That is not the majority of women are not having sex and having abortions, and having sex and having abortions, just having that as their normal. That's not what any woman I know is doing.
Yeah. And like we said, we're not saying that we don't think that doesn't exist. We're just saying that it's likely a small minority. And this is why, if you guys go back into some of the studies, and I have to pull up my notes here, but within this whole Roe v. Wade conversation, birth control is also on the line. And birth control, specifically the type of birth control that I'm on, is the IUD. And some people believe that the IUD is a form of abortion, which it is not, and that is just absolutely absurd. Um, and other forms of birth control, Plan B is also seen as a form of abortion, and it is not, which is also absurd. This is why I'm spending a lot of time on my channel, especially during this season, to talk about women's health care and what the IUD actually does and what Plan B actually does, and actually how your body works as a woman. These things are important for you to know and understand. uh, Tirza can share her conversation. I can ask Tirza if she wants me to share what I asked her about IUD and something that she thought. So there's me. I have an IUD, and so something that I learned through Dr. Stacey Sims' course is that you actually still have a normal cycle when you're on the IUD, right? And a lot of women don't know that. They think if they don't have their period, that they're just like, I don't know, like they kind of had a hysterectomy or something. It's like, no, all your organs still work, everything still works. It's the fact that the IUD is localized in your uterus, that whole environment within your uterus and just your uterus changes. And so you have a bleed still. Some do, some don't, because the hormone progestin, which is a different hormone in your body, that then what you're actually is a synthetic hormone that's given to your body and not your actual natural hormone, is thinning your uterine lining so you don't have a bleed. But guess what? You still ovulate. You still ovulate, and because the IUD is there and it's releasing progestin and it's thinning your hormone lining, it just makes it a lot more or less likely for it to be a viable environment for you to get pregnant. There's no exploding of sperm in there. It's not an IED. It doesn't take out your uterus. Everything still works, you know. And this is really a great choice for a lot of women. It's a great choice for a lot of women. If we are bound to just one form of birth control that is not taking into consideration a woman's health, because each woman needs a different prescription, she needs a different choice. And that's what we're talking about here. Birth control is on the line, people, when we're talking about Roe v. Wade. And if you're talking about trying to protect a life, let's also talk about giving the women a choice for the type of birth control that they use. If they don't want to use any hormones and just go condoms or the pull-out method, I don't believe in that method, but whatever, do that. But I'm just saying, like, we all need choices, and there's so many different birth control choices out there to prevent you from even having to go into the abortion clinic in the first place. So the fact that these politicians are trying to put birth control on the line too in this conversation that's very concerning for me.
That's where it's a step too far.
That is a huge step too far to me.
Well, I'd like to swing back to something you brought up earlier, which really, that's a natural segue to. You were asking, why is it that women are always at the center of these things? Mm-hmm. In being able to study another culture in another region, I was able to more closely examine United States culture and society. And really, the driving force behind most socio-cultural changes in most societies, especially in the 20th century and the 21st century, it's all driven by women. Mm-hmm. And I think that scares the powers that be in the traditional power bases in most society. And just simply having a frank discussion about women's health and women's place in public places. Mm. This is a much more profound thing in the Middle East, where women either have to wear a keffiyeh or some kind of shamag, or either a face covering or a head covering, because of some vague description in the Quran pertaining to women being kind of subdued and not attracting attention to themselves. And that because it was written in such a vague way, it allowed for any interpretation based on local customs and concepts of what they really wanted that to be. So that a head covering in the Balkans, for say, would probably come halfway up your head, but you can still see someone's face. In a place like Saudi Arabia, much of the women are completely covered without an eye slit. That's a demonstration of power by saying you are not really to be seen in a public place.
Mm-hmm.
Nor do we want to hear you, really, but we definitely don't want to see you. There's a certain privilege that we need to acknowledge in the United States that no one is pronouncing or saying that to women.
Mm-hmm.
We are saying we want to take away your rights as a personal choice, kind of in a, not a libertarian party, but a libertarian choice. Having an abortion means I'm taking personal responsibility for my medical decisions and my health and my being. I don't want the government involved, which is an interesting thing for predominantly Republican base to be promoting. We don't want women to make their own choices about their bodies, but we also don't want the government involved in anything we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a remarkable caveat that they include for themselves based on the own agenda they're looking to promote.
Yeah.
It is women. I think that's really what it is about. Women do drive change. Women are the ones who basically say there's got to be some new things going on here, and some women are much louder about it. Maybe don't always take the approach that may get them the result they want because they're not really presenting the subject in the right manner to the audience that they're looking to communicate it to.
Mm-hmm.
But their message might be right. They may be on the right side of history. They're just marketed in a very different way by those who don't agree with their agenda.
Right. And there's also, as you were talking about the keffiyeh and the head garments, I also want to kind of bring up the protest that's happening out in the Middle East. I forgot which.
In Iran.
In Iran.
This has to do with the murder of a lady named Masa Amini.
Mm-hmm.
She apparently was not covering her head enough. It is not to the same degree as they do in Saudi Arabia, where the Wahhabis demand that it's just an eye slit, or in Afghanistan, where it's kind of a beekeeper, like they just have their eyes. In Iran, women are usually allowed to just have their forehead showing, and she had it kind of halfway up. And the morality police, something that I'm sure the modern Republican Party would like to have in the United States. Roving gangs of men go around basically beating people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the way they think they should be done. And she refused to change her headscarf, and they arrested her, tied her up in a chair, and basically beat her to death in the police station. Mm-hmm. And that got out, and naturally people are pissed because imagine having a daughter and that's what happens. She wasn't committing a crime. She was just walking around and had more hair showing than you liked. And we have to be prepared to not only call this stuff out, but actively support the people who want a little bit more sane policy in their public life. To be living under the regime, which is protected by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, a paramilitary group that does a lot of shady shit, but we won't get into that. But really, they're the power behind the morality police, and they're the ones who dictate terms on a societal level, and they're not really subject to normal laws. They kind of do what they want, operate as a mafia, fundraise, and involved in all kinds of things. But yeah, if you want change in Iran, not only support the people who are protesting, but call for the United States Department of the Treasury to start investigating all the different places around the world that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps money launders, and go after their partners and go after the banks where they hide their money and go after any affiliates that they have.
That's powerful stuff, man. Hit them where the money is.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, hit them where the money is. Man, well, we've been going on and on in this conversation. As you can tell, me and Daniel can go on and on for a while. That's why we are together. Anyway, but if you stayed with us this far, I really want to thank you, because this was not an easy conversation. But I hope it was informative to you. I hope it opened your mind to think, even if you have a different belief or different thought process behind it, I hope you stayed to the end, and I hope it opened your mind. In the meantime, you can check us out on YouTube. I will leave the description and the link down below where you can visit us to listen to more podcasts. I hope you guys have a great day and enjoy the rest of your time. You want to say something?
Yeah, thanks everyone. We also would very much like to encourage you to get out there and vote. And in general, show up for things that you care about. Tweeting and posting means fuck all. Show up, vote, and show up to support those who need your help.
Amen.